Hey, how are you today? I hope you are fine and safe. Maybe things are going well or they are going poor, but we always have a reason to thank God. He is able in all things. He is our strength in all things. This is the third video this week, the third devotion, and we will continue on with the story of Jesus. The story of Jesus is taking some new turns today, revealing something about his own people. So let's see what happens. Oh, and before we forget, we have the new mobile pay number, which you can use to support our work. So be free to donate. Let me read the gospel text of today. It's from the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 1 to 16. You will have the links of the texts in the text field of this video and also the Arabic translated right there. Then Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." Then the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law he ought to die because he has made himself the Son of God." When Pilate heard this statement, he was even more afraid. He entered his headquarters again and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. So Pilate said to him, "You will not speak to me? Do you not know that I have authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" Jesus answered him, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar." So when Pilate heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Stone Pavement, in Aramaic Gabbatha. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about the 6th hour, that's midday. He said to the Jews, "Behold your king." They cried out, "Away with him! Away with him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priests answered, "We have no king but Caesar." So he delivered him over to them to be crucified. In today's gospel, the Jewish people denied Jesus and forced Pilate to crucify him, even when Pilate wanted to release him when he heard that he is possibly the Son of God. Pilate understood that the claim of Jesus being the Son of God is a big thing, a big religious thing. If he is involved with this type of religious conflict, it might not end well with him. In the end, he submitted to the will of the Jews to save himself from any accusations against Caesar. Today we see how Jesus is utterly rejected. First, the disciples left Jesus, which we read on Monday, and today the whole Jewish people reject him. So even though he is the Son of God, he is not a prophet in his own land or among his own people. Instead, he is rejected. The fate of Jesus is awful and devastating, but also a blessing. Why do I say this? It is the way God planned to invite pagans also into his kingdom, not only the Jews. Before the New Testament, God had revealed himself only to Israel, who are later called the Jews. They were his elect and chosen people from among all other nations. God chose them. He guided them, called himself their God, and protected them from all difficulties of surrounding foes, enemies. The point is that he was only their God, nobody else's. But today we see an important turn in this concept of being God's elect. St. Paul's letter to Romans chapters 9 to 11 tell us detailed descriptions about that. St. Paul states there that the reason that pagans are included to receive the gospel of Jesus is because his own people, the Jews, rejected him. The downfall of the Jewish people, because they did not believe in Jesus, became a victory to all others, all other peoples and nations. Because we, at least me, who am not a Jew by origin, am now invited into God's kingdom as well. Through this terrible rejection came the salvation of pagans alongside with those Jews who believed in Jesus. Those Jews are, for instance, Jesus' disciples, other followers, and many of the women who also followed Jesus as well. So that's how God's grace is expanded to include all those who are by origin non-Jews. That's why I, as a Christian, am also included in the recipients of the gospel of Jesus. To have a conclusion or an ending for today's devotion, I raise the words of Jesus in the gospel. He answers to Pilate, "You would have no authority over me at all, unless it had been given for you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." These words of Jesus state that he knows exactly what is happening. He is depending on God the Father, who has accepted Pilate to be in this authority, an earthly authority. But God can take it away just like that if he chooses. In a previous devotion I mentioned that we should trust God in all things. And here Jesus is doing just that. He is trusting the Father in all things, even though he is waiting for his own crucifixion. He still chooses to follow and trust in God. Trusting God is something that ultimately tells us something about our faith. That tells a lot if we trust in God in all things or if we don't. Do you? For me, I confess that it's sometimes very difficult. But that is the one thing I need. I need to trust in God. That is the essence of faith, to have trust in him, even though earthly circumstances are difficult. When I see myself not trusting God, I know that I need to take more time with him, to pray, to read the word from the Bible, to be connected and share life and faith with other Christians, to meditate on God's word, its meaning, and what kind of applications and effects it has on my own life, or does it? If it doesn't, I need to really consider what am I doing then. Simply to intentionally in my mind, I turn my thoughts from fear and worry to God, who comforts, who takes care, who will ultimately sustain me. He is the one whom is sustaining me. I urge you to do that as well, even though you might have very many difficulties and worries of life, especially in today's situation. Have comfort and peace and trust in God alone. God is with us. So now we've come to the end of today's devotion video. Thank you for everyone who has come here to watch and listen and join to understand a little more about these themes as we come closer to the crucifixion of Jesus on Good Friday. I hope you'll continue following, and you will always find us in Facebook, YouTube, under the name Luther Church Helsinki. Don't forget to give your offerings as well through the mobile pay number, which we will show right here. Above all, may the peace of Christ be with you all.